Colonel Rob Maness has a lifelong record of providing dedicated service to this nation. Having worked his way up from the enlisted ranks to full colonel, he served our country for more than 32 years. He has served as a bomber squadron commander, bomb disposal technician, Joint Chiefs of Staff Operations Officer, assisted the National Security Team with the campaign plan for the global war on terrorism. He authored the first theater nuclear war plan and served as the Vice Commander of America's largest airborne intelligence wing. Colonel Rob Maness is a true American hero. This is Rob Maness Live.
China not only has the biggest Navy in the world, bigger than our Navy by 41 hulls and growing, hulls that are on average newer than ours, right? And for those who say, well, it's not a big deal, our ships are more capable, obviously quantity has a quality all of its own. And you add into the other facts, which are that China actually, by some meaningful measures, has the three biggest navies in the world. If you factor in the Coast Guard, the Maritime Militia, to say nothing about what is most problematic for our Navy, which is their PLA rocket force, their anti-Navy. They've been designing a force exquisitely over the last 20 years so as to push us out of the region. That, to me, is a problem. What they're doing in Xinjiang is a problem. To the extent that they're leveraging their economic power to coerce American companies, foreign companies, that's the problem. It's that behavior we're trying to stop. I would love to see a world in which the Chinese people continue to benefit from exposure to the global economy. But if the Chinese Communist Party continues on its current course, I don't think we're going to have an option but to selectively decouple or de-risk or diversify in key areas.
China, the largest Navy in the world and America's most capable adversary, folks. Welcome back to More War Monday on the Rob Maness Show, and we're live on Patriot.tv and X Spaces simulcast. And it's worth quoting that man again. China not only has the biggest Navy in the world, they've been designing a rocket force exquisitely over the last 20 years so as to push us out of the region. That's former Select Committee on the CCP Chairman Mike Gallagher, and a Marine, by the way. In addition to its third aircraft carrier undergoing sea trials, China has also silently unveiled a groundbreaking development in naval technology, the world's first dedicated drone carrier, as it looks to the future of naval aviation. And in breaking news, just yesterday, U.S. officials are now privately delivering an unusual warning to telecommunications companies. Undersea cables that ferry internet traffic across the Pacific Ocean could be vulnerable to tampering by Chinese repair ships. State Department officials said a state-controlled Chinese company that helps repair international cables, SB Submarine Systems, appeared to be hiding its vessels' locations from radio and satellite tracking services, which the officials and others said defied easy explanation. Well, China has also become the #1 shipbuilding country, and this has raised concerns within the U.S. Navy. Aren't they a little late? Well, now the Navy is seeking cooperation from Japan and South Korea to enhance its naval capabilities in response to China's rapid naval expansion. Well, my guest today is David Pine. He's Executive Vice President to the Task Force on National and Homeland Security, a former U.S. Army Headquarters Staff Officer, and a national security expert. David, welcome back to the Rob Maness Show.
Thanks, Rob. It's great to be back on.
Well, it's good to have you, man. When you look at what Admiral Aquilino, the last Indo-PACOM commander who just left office, said as he was going out, that over his term, in addition to the third aircraft carrier that's undergoing sea trials now, China created 20 major warships, 400 fighter jets. Most of them are fourth and fifth generation. They doubled their inventory of ballistic missiles, and they've increased their rate of launching satellites by 50%. What is going on?
Well, we know from just captured intercepts that China is mobilizing for war. They've been mobilizing for a world war with the U.S. Since April of 2022. They've mobilized 360 roll-on, roll-off ferries, which are dual use that can be used for landing troops in Taiwan. They've converted, civilian industries to full-time military production. So we have Russia and China, on a war footing, essentially, at the same time, while the U.S. remains under a peacetime economy. But the revelation that China has doubled the size of their ballistic missile and perhaps cruise missile force as well over the last 3 years is rather daunting, because I did a study back in 2021 that China had already had 4,170 identified nuclear-capable ballistic missiles. If they were to double that force, I mean, that's 11 times more ballistic missiles, nuclear-capable ballistic missiles that the U.S. currently deploys.
Yeah, it's really troubling, especially when we look at our open source intelligence reporting. We don't even get close to those numbers on our assessment of the PRC, David. What does that capability, just the ballistic missiles alone, how does that improve their ability to project power, especially in the Pacific area of responsibility, if they were to go to war with the United States in the Pacific?
Yeah, well, of course, most of these missiles are short-range ballistic missiles and medium-range ballistic missiles, as well as anti-ship ballistic missiles. So really what they've done is they've achieved what I would call theater, certainly theater nuclear supremacy over the U.S. I believe they have strategic nuclear superiority as well with their massive nuclear buildup, which, according to Admiral Richards, the former STRATCOM commander, would be mostly completed by early this year. Of course, it's now almost mid-year. You also mentioned that U.S. intelligence had identified that China has the ability to build ships 232 times faster than us, according to top secret intel that was leaked by, I think, Airman First Class Teixeira. So I think during World War II, Japan had the ability to produce warships perhaps 3 times or 4 times slower than we did. I mean, 232 times faster is just incredible, and it just really shows that if we were to fight even a purely conventional war against China in the Pacific, that they would massively outproduce us. One of our colleagues with the Committee for the Present Danger of China, I think, identified that China could outbuild us 5 to 6 times faster in advanced weapon systems. We know that we only have enough long-range precision strike missiles, guided munitions for about 1 week of intense combat, at which point we would run out, and would take months to build a significant number more. So we are definitely outgunned and overmatched with China over any potential Pacific war. Yeah,
and our fleet is I think Gallagher said that they were 41 ships larger than ours at this point, and continue to build. And if they have the ability to create ships at 270 something times faster than we do, that's going to increase their ability not just to project power in the Pacific and Indian Ocean region, but possibly into the Western Hemisphere too. And continue to challenge us. I mean, we're the main arbiters of freedom of navigation still in the world today, and obviously we have operations ongoing in the Red Sea and the Arabian Sea, in the Mediterranean, and those kind of things because of the 2 hotspots, Ukraine and Israel, where the current wars are going on, and we're stretched pretty thin, aren't we?
We are. We like to call ourselves the global hegemon, and certainly we live in a U.S.-led international order. But unfortunately, the enemy alliance is more formidable than ours in terms of military, industrial, and economic, perhaps even likely military technological strength. So we need to pursue a more realistic foreign policy, as I believe you've been advocating for and championing as well. And that's going to result in the need for some hard choices. There's really no Russian threat to NATO, other than to the degree that we provoke them to attack us by continuing to escalate things in our military assistance with Ukraine, perhaps even sending Western military forces to fight Russia directly. But in terms of Taiwan, that's a nuclear red line for China, and Biden has threatened to defend China or defend Taiwan militarily 4 times. Every single time that he's been asked, has never walked that back. So China I believe, is proceeding under the assumption that the U.S. will defend Taiwan, and therefore there will be a need for war with the U.S. But unlike many prognosticators that have predicted such, a Pacific war with China, a second Sino-American war, if you will, since we already fought them in Korea, and of course that war never ended technically with a peace agreement, would likely be end over within a few weeks, at least in terms of the combat in the Pacific. Due to the fact, China would likely attack us with a massive cyber and counterspace first strike on day 1 of major combat operations. So I think it's critical that U.S. policymakers and planners, begin to consider whether it's possible we could make some kind of strategic compromise with China, perhaps with the EU-style confederation agreement, as unpalatable as that might sound, that would preserve Taiwanese control of their military and avert war. Other than that, we could simply declare strategic clarity that we would not defend Taiwan militarily in the event of war.
Yeah, and that has its own drawbacks, really, even if we came out and openly did that. On the subject of the Navy and the maritime shipping, we've seen that the United States is now back in the Philippines, it looks like, in the northern islands, and doing exercises for coastal defense. Is there a threat as far as a Taiwan operation goes of the Chinese PLA landing on the Philippine Islands?
Absolutely, because if we go to war with China over Taiwan, it's going to be it's not going to be a limited offensive as Russia's been waging against Ukraine. It's going to be an all-out global war that likely will go nuclear, at least super EMP level, and it will be fought on globally on multiple fronts. North Korean invasion of South Korea would be guaranteed. Iran might move against occupy southern Iraq, and then Russia, of course, could attack NATO directly if it feels that's in its interest. But it would be it would involve a lot of people believe that if we don't defend Taiwan, then China's going to come and cross the first island chain and invade Japan, the Philippines, and maybe Australia. In fact, I would say it's the opposite. If we do defend Taiwan, that would ensure that China would invade Taiwan, the Philippines, and likely Australia as well, and would expose the Western U.S. to a Chinese invasion too. So I think we need to draw perhaps a nuclear red line in the Pacific around our treaty allies, but we need to be realistic in terms of whether a war with China over Taiwan is even winnable, because in my estimation, the chances of a U.S. victory, even defending the status quo with regards to Taiwan, is extremely low.
Yeah, I think I don't want to quote it, but one of the think tanks has run a series of war games between the United States and China over Taiwan over many, many years, and the latest ones using, I'm assuming their most recent public force structure has the U.S. winning, but at a very, very, very high cost. And as time moves on, I think that was about a year ago, though. So as time moves on, these folks can pump out more and more ships, aircraft, missiles, and ammunition that we're not capable of doing. And that's one of the things I want to talk to you about during this show is our manufacturing base and what we need to do to address that, because it's really bad. I mean, I've got some numbers we'll talk about later in the show that are really bad. We got to take our first break, David. When we come back, let's talk about the drone aircraft carrier that's an interesting development that I want to get your take on how that would best improve China's capability into that second island chain and maybe even a coastal invasion of the United States of America. I'm Rob Maness. We're live right here on Patriot.tv and X Spaces simulcast. We'll be right back.
The world is about to shift. Banks are going cashless globally with the emergence of central bank digital currency, which will bring with it programmable money and the ability to turn on or off your purchasing power based on your digital social profile. It's like the equivalent of spyware in your bank account. You need to get out of the system with the world's safest and most private assets, silver and gold. Call Kirk Elliott, PhD at 877-547-5743. That's 877-KIRK-PhD.
Sounds rolling, all 3 cameras, we're good.
Is there any regrets that you have in life? I should sit here and say, yeah, I got a lot of regrets. But when I look back on my life and I understand the lives that were lost, I mean, I'm sitting here with you. And I can tell my story.
Former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn pleaded guilty today to lying to the FBI.
He was one of the most respected generals in the military.
He was, by definition, the most dangerous possible person for Donald Trump to hire.
Really brilliant military career, serving 33 years.
Why was he being so elusive?
Mike Flynn told the truth and faced life in prison.
Every American needs this historical DVD keepsake. Flynn delivered the truth, whatever the cost. Hand signed by General Michael Flynn, one of America's most treasured military heroes. Order now at the Patriot TV store. Go to Patriot TV, click on Store, and grab a once-in-a-lifetime chance to own a treasured piece of American history. And get your own personal download link to watch America's most talked-about movie, as well as a DVD hand-signed by General Michael Flynn. Use promo code PTV at checkout to get special savings. The Patriot TV store. Incredible savings and a secure, hassle-free shopping experience.
All right, to now the news now. The Chinese Navy has secretly built in what could be called the world's first dedicated drone carrier ship. A squad ship that looks like a mini aircraft carrier underlines China's aim to advance the military use of drones and their deployment in any battle. We take a look at the specifications of the Type 076 amphibious assault ship. Now believed to serve as both a helicopter and a drone carrier, the Type 076 amphibious assault ship will feature a deck length equivalent to about a Chinese or US Navy aircraft carrier. As cited in naval news, China's amphibious assault ships that launch manned helicopters suggest that the new ship flight deck is designed for fewer helicopters or smaller aircraft like drones. And what appears new is that the Chinese ship's entire function may be to launch and land drones alone, although its purpose will only be confirmed by future observations of its testing and operations. Lastly, the Type 076, which will be similar in size to the Type 075, is expected to be equipped with the most advanced type of electromagnetic launch systems. In the ever-evolving landscape of modern warfare, drones have emerged as formidable assets, offering unparalleled versatile systems and efficiency across various military domains. As navies worldwide seek advanced capabilities and strategic advantages, the integration of drones into maritime operations have become of prominent focus. For all the latest news, download the VON app and
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show here on Patriot.tv. It's More War Monday, and we're talking with Mr. David Pine, the Executive Vice President of the Task Force on Homeland Security. And, sir, I wanted to get your take on this drone aircraft carrier and what it means, not just to the potential war that China's building up for, but for worldwide operations, quite honestly. This is the first of its kind, and we really want to know how they're going to use this strategically and tactically, don't we? I mean, what do you see as the vision that China is putting forth as they design, develop, and build this particular type of small aircraft carrier or an amphibious assault ship like the U.S. Marines use here for helicopters and F-35s for using their ARG responses?
Yeah, well, this drone carrier is, obviously it's very innovative. There's never been a ship designed like it. It shows that China's, ability to design advanced ships that are, more technically innovative than the U.S. is clear. But it's a super carrier size. It's larger than the Midway class, super carriers that we built in the mid to late 1940s. About 48,000 tons. It's a Type 76, modified Type 76, which are typically helicopter carriers that the PLA Navy has been employing along with their Type 75s, which are designed to support amphibious assault operations. But these drone carriers, could be obviously could be used effectively against U.S. naval forces. Or in kind of amphibious assault support role. It's possible that that they could be armed with conventional EMP weapons. Conventional EMPs could be used either by Chinese hypersonic, supersonic cruise missiles, or even anti-ship ballistic missiles or drones to knock out the electronics for. A large part of a U.S. carrier task force. I don't view this as a game changer. I think it's, the Chinese massive nuclear buildup and their massive advantage over us in theater nuclear weapons and ballistic missiles and cruise missiles is much more, grave. There was one report I think that you and I both saw in a group, a chat group that we were members of that reported that there's one Chinese facility that may be producing up to 1,000 cruise missiles a day. I think that's likely, overstated, but even still, it just, confirms the massive, Chinese advantage over the U.S. in terms of long-range guided munitions, both ballistic missiles and cruise missiles, and it's something that it's going to take many years, I would say over a decade, for us to try to mitigate by massively expanding the U.S. manufacturing base to the level we had during the Cold War. Yeah,
as far as the EMP goes, one of the things that when I saw this that I first thought about was the fratricide of themselves. From a electronic spectrum perspective, that does this indicate that this may be a different approach away from like a super EMP type use of that type of weapon into the more localized conventional type weapon you referred to?
Well, I think all of our nuclear armed enemies, whether it's Russia, China, North Korea, or even Iran, they have these types of weapons in their arsenal. It's just a full spectrum. They have, non-strategic nuclear weapons, they have strategic nuclear weapons, they have conventional EMPs that are more localized to, say, a carrier battle group or, a flotilla of warships, or, part of a city, several city blocks. And then they have super EMPs. And as you mentioned, there's the potential, if a super EMP, for example, over Taiwan used, I don't think there's any chance of that happening. Because the area of effect would reach into Fujian province and, severely degrade or disable, massive Chinese naval forces that are concentrated there. So that's where the conventional EMP weapons can come in handy. Especially with a hypersonic conventional EMP that could, we have very limited abilities to shoot down, if any. They could, penetrate into, right near and detonate essentially over a U.S. carrier task force battle group. That would be devastating. and so they have all these weapons in their inventory that fall short of the nuclear level, or certainly nuclear ground and air bursts versus a space burst in the case of a super EMP that they could use to defeat us. That's very troubling.
It is very troubling. And, David, with their third aircraft carrier at sea trials right now, we have 11 worldwide aircraft carriers. And with that capability, and then you add this to it, the Chinese Navy is really going to be able to challenge us with power projection all throughout the Pacific and the Indian Oceans, aren't they?
Absolutely. And as Captain Fennell, who is the former chief of Pacific, Fleet Intelligence, back in the days when it was called the Pacific Fleet, or PACOM, now it's Indo-PACOM, has stated that he assesses that China may enjoy effectively a 10-to-1 advantage over the U.S. in warships in the South China Sea region. And I think to a large extent because we just can't maintain those ships in the region, because all of our bases in the area are going to be massively hit on the first day of major combat operations in any direct war with the U.S. And they'll have to go back to likely to Hawaii or if we're lucky Australia to to refit, rearm, and resupply. So again, that these are all kind of red light indicators that really would cause a lot of caution if I were a senior U.S. policymaker, that I would restraint in terms of a more measured response in what against what I believe is an almost inevitable Chinese blockade or invasion of Taiwan that's likely to materialize as early as this fall.
Wow, that's quite a statement there. Well, let's go over to our live audience and see if we've got a question up. Patriot Rob is our host today, and Thomas is helping him out. Go ahead, guys. I see a hand up over there.
Thomas, go ahead.
So, Colonel, I know that currently right now we have in sea trials the unmanned sea vehicle fleet currently being tested in San Diego, which is going to be transferred out to Hawaii. Sir, can we talk about what the implications of how this USV fleet will actually play a significant force in protecting our assets overseas?
That's a great question, David. I don't know if you heard him or not, but he's asking about the significance of the new undersea vehicle fleet that's in trials right now and will soon be transferred out to the Pacific, I think the Hawaiian Islands at some point. And what is the impact of that going to be as far as our capability goes?
Well, I think those are force multipliers, in a purely conventional conflict with China. But I think that, China's likely to employ a massive, cyber first strike, minimally, counter space first strike against the U.S. The objective would be to, essentially cause, state collapse or paralysis here in the homeland. That would prevent us from reinforcing the theater in the Pacific. And I think that's very credible. And it's been discussed publicly by the director of the FBI, Chris Wray, who's really been sounding the alarm on the massive Chinese cyber threat. And we don't really have a lot of effective means to guard against it. The U.S. maintains one of the strongest cyber offensive capabilities in the world, but it's we're also the most vulnerable of any of the superpowers or the nuclear powers to this type of attack. And so, I'm not I don't share the I guess optimism of Robert O'Brien, the former Trump's former national security advisor, that we can successfully massively surge the size of the U.S. naval fleet and win some kind of Battle of Jutland, modern day Battle of Jutland, or Battle of Leyte Gulf. It's just not going to happen that way. This is going to be a war that's likely going to be won perhaps on the first day of the war. If we get cyber attacked, if the U.S. were to engage in its own cyber first strike, I think we could help level the playing field. If we were to engage in a massive cyber and counter space first strike against China, if the decision was made to defend Taiwan, I think that could change the outcome. Wouldn't change the final outcome, I think, but it would certainly cause far more damage to China. It's a very difficult picture. We've never faced this level of existential threat in U.S. history. The war against Nazi Germany and Imperial Japan was a war that never threatened the U.S. homeland. Of course, ever since the advent of Soviet nuclear bombers, the U.S. homeland has been potentially vulnerable to massive destruction from 1951 onward, and that threat's only become much more pronounced with the advent of all these other weapons, such as super EMPs that were developed in the 1990s by the Russian Federation.
Yeah, and in the next segment, I want to talk about the cyber operations that Ray has been warning about in this breaking news. That's why I brought it into the show today about the undersea cable espionage threat from a kinetic perspective from these so-called civilian repair ships. And we'll be right back with David Pine talking more War Monday, the threat of China, America's most capable adversary, in my opinion, and we're on Patriot.tv.
We've learned through the pandemic we can never be caught unprepared again. And so many Americans, when COVID hit, they had nothing in the house. Stores were shut down and doctors' offices were shut down. And even if doctors prescribed drugs, hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, pharmacists wouldn't fill the prescriptions. That was a nightmare.
Now the situation is much worse. We have these horrible supply chain problems. In our emergency medical kit at the Wellness Company, we have 8 prescription drugs that are all potentially life-saving.
Most people who died with COVID, they died in the hospital because they didn't receive early treatment.
Every American family should have one of these.
I can tell you the Wellness Company kit is the answer.
BellaPatriot.com. Let me explain to you what this is. This is an elixir. It's a daily elixir. It is a collagen, and it also has something known as astaxanthin that crosses the brain-blood barrier, that's loaded with antioxidants to take on the free radicals. And then it has something called cat's claw. That is from a bark on a vine in Peru. So these are 3 very powerful ingredients. Now, if you go to BellaPatriot.com, there are your science and clinical trials, right? And if you want to read the science, there it is. You don't get nearly 80 clinical trials for nothing. So again, you want to talk about science, the information behind it, this is it. We highly urge you to check it out. The results for Melissa and I have been very powerful. She and I take it each and every day. It's very simple. You just rip the top, drink it, and then throw away the container. We would urge you to go there, order it now, click and order now, and get your subscription.
Thousands of miles above and below, our communication courses through satellites and undersea cables.
99% of all communications around the world, for example, go via submarine cables. There's this tendency to believe that we're now reliant solely on satellites for communications, but 1% of the global communications traffic goes via satellites. So satellites are different, have different values for surveillance and for global positioning and other things. And certainly they play a role in communications and as backups for submarine cables.
That's Greg Copley, president of the International Strategic and Studies Association. He notes how almost all of our modern life runs through these undersea cables. from finance to online shopping, communications, and entertainment. It's all powered by over 500 undersea cables spanning 500,000 miles. Copley notes how that 1% for satellites plays an important role. But first, let's zoom in on undersea cables. Given all the communications humming through these cables, they've been dubbed the world's information superhighways. But in the current world environment, the cable's strategic and military importance has been pushed under the spotlight.
Undersea cables are literally crossing no man's land. If you think of the reality of human history throughout the millennia, and even today, there's no such thing as international law. There's only your ability to project your power and to defend your assets. And undersea cables are really projections of national capabilities and the like.
A report by the Center for Strategic and International Studies notes diplomats and military orders pass through classified cables.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. We're live in our X Spaces simulcast, and it's More War Monday, and we're talking with contributor to the show, David Pine, about these issues associated with the Chinese military and their buildup to a war. It appears that they want to fight on a global scale. And David, I wanted to use this this subject here to talk about the potential cyber attacks. But you know, in the Cold War, the United States had developed extensive spy technology on undersea cables communications against the USSR. So it was a little surprising to me that it was leaked out that our intelligence folks, and Chris Wray specifically, are going around and privately talking to the big tech companies like Facebook and Google, who are the ones putting these fiber optic cables in primarily now. They're fiber optics. The old copper is going away. But that these repair ships the Chinese use are doing something. They're turning their tracking systems off so they effectively disappear. And Chris Wray and the like are saying they're conducting espionage operations. I have to say, I'm not surprised. Every great power would want to do this. I mean, 99% of our comms go through those.
Yeah, well, I first want to say that in response to something you said earlier in this segment, that I don't believe China does want a war with direct war with the U.S. I think their plan to become the global hegemon is working quite splendidly with a Manchurian president in the White House, something we've never had in our history. Controlled CCP asset, as we've discussed in our various groups. And essentially, taking over making the U.S. economy entirely dependent on Chinese goods. Whereas even if we didn't go to war with China and imposed very severe economic sanctions, as I would advocate against China, our economy would certainly go into a depression on a scale that rivaled the first Great Depression, very likely. But in terms of the, they'll only go to war, I think, if we defend Taiwan, but against us. But in terms of your question, back in 1914, the British Navy, cut the 5 undersea cables connecting the U.S. and the Western Hemisphere to Germany, and so that enabled them to take control of the information space and broadcast British propaganda, but we never got the other side. And if we had known the truth about about the other side of the war, I don't think the U.S. would have ever gotten involved in World War I, and history would have been changed. So essentially, that was a war-winning operation that the British did just in the first couple days of World War I. And I think with regards to China, our undersea cables connecting the U.S. to Taiwan. Would be really critical because I think Taiwan would likely come under immediate, cyber attack and counter space attack, either at the beginning of a Chinese amphibious invasion or even, during a blockade of Taiwan. And so, those cables would be critical to maintain communications because they I think they're more resilient against cyber attack or destruction than other modes of communication that are above ground. So, I'm not sure there's a whole lot we can do about it, but that is something I stated in on my Real War newsletter. I kind of did the most likely scenario that I foresee with a Chinese invasion of Taiwan and how that would go down, and I included that the cutting of the undersea cables as a critical operation on the part of China to completely cut us off from Taiwan's leadership, because we don't even have any kind of military communications with in terms of joint defense planning or operations or anything like that. So again, that makes it even more unlikely, implausible that we would be successful in defending Taiwan. We don't even have so much as a contingency plan for how we would defend Taiwan against a Chinese attack.
Yeah, I mean, we've explicitly denied ourselves from that planning and establishing those capabilities, and we would be operating on the fly. So as part of a larger cyber operation, I hate to use the term cyber attack and get people thinking it's just about digits and zeros and ones through computer systems, because cutting these fiber optic lines, say they don't want to just isolate Taiwan, but they want to isolate the United States and cut these lines off of the West Coast. And simultaneously off of the East Coast. That's entirely a possible use of this technology from these so-called civilian repair ships. I mean, they could be placing devices whenever they go off their tracking systems. They could be running operations, placing devices on these lines to kinetically cut them, and then at the same time runs, a standard, more typical cyber operation attack against whatever their primary target is, like Taiwan, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And I think I've read stories that Russia is doing the same thing, with regards to the transatlantic cables connecting Britain with the U.S. So they likely have the exact same plans. And, wars can be won or lost based on, information dominance. Certainly, I think that the U.S. and the West has maintained information dominance over Russia and the war in Ukraine. So it's not always, the decisive battle space. But, with regards to a war with China over Taiwan, it very well might be.
You're absolutely right. Well, let's go over to our Spaces audience and take a question. I think, Rob, we've got a hand over there.
Yeah, Patriot Souls, did you have a question?
Yes, mate. Thank you. This is sort of predicated on who gets in the White House and if they do deals with China. If China goes to war with Taiwan and it's going to escalate, Russia doesn't want China to fall. So with Russia having the Poseidon stealth thermonuclear drone torpedoes off either American coast, I've heard that they've got 4 at least off either coast, which will create massive tsunamis, highly radioactive. So, and they could be used against Taiwan too. So my question is, would that be a game changer if, with everything that China's got, if major cities here along the coast were hit with a radioactive tsunami, and what's the possibility of Russia taking that step to make sure it's preserved by keeping China preserved?
That's an excellent question. So Russia, of course, has deployed its Belgorod submarine armed Poseidon nuclear UUVs, which have been estimated to carry warheads up to 100 megatons. I've even seen 200 megatons, but I think 100 megatons is the likely yield. Just one of those submarines would rival the total combined explosive, firepower of the entire U.S. nuclear arsenal. I think our nuclear arsenal is likely about 650 or thereabouts megatons. So that one submarine carrying Poseidons could have about 600. And they, something that has not been covered by anyone else that I've seen is they recently deployed a Poseidon-carrying submarine in the Pacific as well, just last year. So they now have Poseidons both in the Atlantic and the Pacific. However, I believe the story that Poseidons are to be used, to take out entire coastlines. I think that's a cover story for the true purpose. Russia and China, I don't think, have any plans to do something like that. Rather, I think I agree with Dr. Peter Pry that the Poseidon UUVs are likely to be utilized in a much more nefarious manner, which would be to trail U.S. nuclear boomer submarines, Ohio nuclear submarines coming out of Kings Bay, Georgia, and Bangor, Washington, and then destroy them at a distance of 50 kilometers. We have essentially out of 14 Ohio nuclear ballistic missile submarines, we have 8 deployed at sea at any given time, according to my sources, 4 at patrol and 4 returning to base, or on their way to patrol stations. So essentially 4 in the Pacific, 4 in the Atlantic that are either in their patrol coverage or perhaps could return to launch missiles at the enemy. And that's really the most survivable element of the U.S. nuclear triad. So if Russia were to use its Poseidons to take out even half of our deployed nuclear submarines, that would be a tremendous blow in terms of a nuclear first strike, which combined with the super EMP attack and perhaps even a counterforce attack against our ICBM silos could really be decisive in knocking the U.S. out in terms of eliminating our nuclear superpower status at the very least, and perhaps even preventing us from launching a meaningful or sizable nuclear retaliatory strike.
Wow. Well, our shipbuilding is a disaster, and when we come back, I think you're right about that. They don't really want to go to war, but they are building to peace through strength capability, and you combine that with the economics of what's going on with China, between the U.S. and China especially, and that's where I think they're headed. And the ship numbers show that. We'll be right back with David Pine here on the Rob Maness Show on More War Monday. China, the largest navy in the world.
Darktalk.com, darktalk.com. Now you hit that website, that's exclusive to Patriot.tv, so you're able to also help your family and support our network to keep us going as well. Let's go to not only satellite phones, but then you just have regular phones as well, regular mobile phones as well. So you can click satellite phones, or you go back to the top, click secure phones. So this gives you various cell phones.
We are protecting your privacy in ways that no one else does. We've talked about how your cell phone is a government tracking device, how it archives where you've been, what you're up to, who you're talking with, what you're searching on the web, and that information is not private. It is available to the cell phone companies and often sold or used against people in court, right? With these phones, and I'm not trying to say that these are for criminals, these are for people who want the privacy that they are afforded by the Constitution, right? Because we don't think that it's our job to track you. It is our job to provide you with communications so you can go about your daily life.
During World War II, for every aircraft carrier that the Japanese built, we built 6. If we were to get into a conflict with China now, we would be Japan and they would be us, although much worse. How do we get to this? And how do we rectify it? How do we strengthen our shipbuilding capacity here in the United States? Also, another little tidbit, the largest Navy in the world now is the Navy of the PRC.
We can go and look at the history, but looking forward, the way that we can best address this is focusing on our competitiveness. I mean, we have a legacy fleet in the Jones Act, which has been that way for 100 years. We have to get more competitive in the global marketplace. We have to change and reorganize for the task. Our maritime agencies are scattered about several different departments. We need to organize for task. We need to focus on competitive measures, make it lucrative to be a merchant mariner, make it lucrative to be a shipyard worker, because those are high-paying jobs. We just need more people there. We need to start building more competitively than we have been.
Does the PRC, are they engaged in some unfair practices that give them an advantage?
Absolutely. It's a state-owned enterprises, and so they benefit both from direct and also indirect subsidies. They also take their orders most often not from an economic perspective, but from a Communist Party's perspective. So they are not a free market entity. And so that allows them to put national assets behind whatever their strategic interests are. If it's buying access into a port, if it's designing ships at a lower cost so that they can elbow in or to take over market share, they'll still do it. Now, there's still a lot of comparative advantages that our allies and that we have in this sector. We just have not taken full advantage of it, and that's probably where the solution lies, where we are today.
Welcome back to the Rob Maness Show. It's More War Monday here, and we're on our X Spaces simulcast, and my guest today is David Pine. And David, from the National Maritime Strategy Guidance published by Congress just at April 30th, so a couple of weeks ago. Here's the numbers. U.S. versus China, just maritime shipping. The U.S. isn't even in the top 15 shipbuilding countries in the world. As you can see by that chart there, China is number one. U.S., less than 200 U.S. flag ocean-going vessels. And the China has greater than 7,000. For shipbuilding orders in 2023, less than 5 for the U.S. and 1,700 for China. U.S. maritime workers, 153,000. Chinese, greater than 600,000. And here's the kicker. Less than 12,000 merchant mariners on the U.S. side and 1.7 million or more on the Chinese side. We cannot project power in the Pacific and Indian Oceans without a maritime fleet and a U.S. Navy large enough and capable enough to do so. There's no way we could do what we did in World War II. We cannot have another Leyte Gulf because we're not there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we certainly maintain naval superiority over the PLA Navy in terms of total carriers. You know, as you mentioned, we have 11 carriers worldwide, but they're spread out all over the world. And China's going to have 90 to 95% of its naval forces in the South China Sea, essentially, maybe the East China Sea, in any conflict with the U.S. So they're going to have total regional naval supremacy over the U.S., superiority, if not supremacy. And, those numbers are just galling. I had no idea that we were below Singapore and Croatia and in Norway and Holland in terms of, ship production. I mean, that just underscores the point, 232 times less shipbuilding capability than China. During World War II, we were the greatest shipbuilding country in the world. We produced 100 aircraft carriers after Pearl Harbor, and those, of course, include escort and light carriers. But still, I think about 30 fleet carriers, and another 70. Actually, I think a lot more than that in terms of escort and light carriers. So the congressman is exactly right. I think any Pacific war with China would be the inverse of what happened during World War II. And during World War II, the U.S. engaged in an island hopping campaign that swept Japanese forces in control from the Pacific, and in a protracted conventional fight with China. It would be the exact opposite. China would move from one U.S. territory to another, from Wake to Guam to Midway to Hawaii, Alaska, islands, Alaska itself, and finally, threatening the U.S. West Coast with a full-scale amphibious invasion. And one has to ask: would they make the same choice that the U.S. made in deciding to save potentially hundreds of thousands of troops that could have died in a full-scale invasion of Japan, and simply say, well, maybe we should just nuke the U.S. so make them easier to occupy, or more likely, engage in a super EMP attack that could cause 90% of the U.S. population to die. And reduce the size of our population to essentially Ukraine's. So that, again, I think most U.S. policymakers live in an alternate reality in which we hear all this talk about the U.S. being the indispensable nation, essentially the global superpower. We're third ranked. I mean, in my estimation, we're the third ranked nuclear power. We're the third ranked military power overall. Certainly, we maintain the best Navy, the best trained Navy, the best equipped Navy. But these asymmetric technologies, particularly unconventional weapons, can eliminate that advantage and cause our naval defeat. And I don't think building more ships is going to make a difference. I think I would be much more supportive of focusing on renuclearizing the Navy. President George H.W. Bush made the fateful decision to unilaterally disarm all of our naval vessels, other than our ballistic missile submarines, from having nuclear weapons. We used to have nuclear weapons on virtually every destroyer, cruiser, and frigate and carrier in the fleet. That's something that we could do fairly quickly. We could, redeploy all of our B-61 gravity bombs, from Europe, take out all 150, redeploy them to our Pacific Fleet carriers and Lightning carriers, so that F-35s could use those to deter Chinese aggression in the Pacific. We could also, take about maybe 150 ACLM, maybe even more warheads, deploy them on, renuclearized Tomahawk missiles that would, could be deployed on every major surface combatant in the Pacific. That would, make China think twice. But currently, we have, no nuclear weapons deployed in the Pacific region outside of our nuclear weapons on our ballistic missile submarines. And if we were to fire even one Trident II in China's direction, I can guarantee you they would fire, a whole lot more back at the U.S. homeland. So we can't take that risk.
Oh, you're absolutely right. I agree with you on redeploying the Tomahawk nuclear and the other smaller nuclear weapons and beef the Navy back up, for goodness sake. I've been advocating for reestablishing our manufacturing base, but because without a maritime fleet and the sailors to go with it, you can't resupply anything in the Pacific Ocean and the Indian Ocean for very long, or very quickly. I mean, you could do a little bit at a time using C-17s and those kind of things, and the 10 or 11 logistics ships that we have, but you can't do it for very long, and that's what you have to have in order to defend yourself. And that's what I'm concerned about. I'm a big peace through strength kind of person, and that's why I'm advocating to reestablish our shipbuilding manufacturing, increase our ability to manufacture long-range bombers, and put those numbers out and provide them to our allies. I read today that Australia is thinking of buying some of the B-21 Raider aircraft, the new bomber that's coming out. Those are good things, but we also need to increase our footprint from an airfield perspective and port perspective, so we have good places to go to get our troops spread out and increase their target problem, because the target solution is too simple for them right now. We can't disperse our forces, either naval or air, to the point where we make a complex target solution for them. And I don't know that just building hardened aircraft shelters is going to be enough, because we saw what the American forces were able to do to those in the first Iraq War. Well, David, thank you very much for joining me today. We appreciate it. It's been a fascinating conversation. I appreciate your time, and look forward to next time.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on. It's been a pleasure.
Absolutely. Well, tomorrow we'll have Daniel Greenfield on as our guest on Training Tuesday. He's got a new book out, Domestic Enemies, The Founding Fathers Fight Against the Left. And we're still doing it. So I'll see you tomorrow on Training Tuesday here on the Rob Maness Show on our X Spaces simulcast.
darktalk.com, darktalk.com. Now you hit that website, that's exclusive to Patriot.tv, so you're able to also help your family and support our network to keep us going as well. Let's go to not only satellite phones, but then you just have regular phones as well, regular mobile phones as well. So you can click satellite phones, or you go back to the top, click secure phones. So this gives you various cell phones.
We are protecting your privacy in ways that no one else does. We've talked about how your cell phone is a government tracking device, how it archives where you've been, what you're up to, who you're talking with, what you're searching on the web, and that information is not private. It is available to the cell phone companies and often sold or used against people in court, right? With these phones, and I'm not trying to say that these are for criminals, these are for people who want the privacy that they are afforded by the Constitution, right? Because we don't think that it's our job to track you. It is our job to provide you with communications so you can go about your daily life.